Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am an executive coach. I work with high achieving men, helping them to master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. Guys, we've got a great conversation for you this evening. Uh, we're talking about placing the cart before the horse. And obviously, that's a huge question. That's a huge no no. But we're going to dive into some things that's going to help. Shape our minds in a different perspective. And that's our goal. Shaped by Shanya. I hope I pronounced that. Thank you for joining. But yeah, we're going to look at that more in depth here. Again, my name is Curtis Brooks. Work with men, high achieving men, that is, and helping them to achieve the goal of integrated leadership. That is the main focus. So again, we're talking about putting the placing the horse before the cart before the horse, and it sounds ridiculous, but it also happens, especially in the way of leadership. Oftentimes, with leadership, we have this idea: I'm going to perform this thing. I'm going to, I got a plan. I'm going to put it all together. And interesting enough, it also works in the way of our own personal lives, I think, as well. We have this grandiose plan of putting this thing together, but in most cases, there are other components that are in the background working, and that prevent us from sometimes achieving those goals. And that is, again, placing the cart before the horse. So, as it relates to high achieving men, most of us as high achieving men, we are absolutely aware of the metrics of that external leadership, and then external leadership involves the metrics. It involves the excuse me, it involves the strategies, it involves the action plans, and so we're absolutely aware of those things. We know the we know the language for that external leadership. And so I want to give you some definitions, just a couple of definitions in regards to when I say the cart, placing the cart before the horse. One, the cart, I'm looking at my notes as well. So placing the cart, or at least the cart in its definition, is really that high achieving man who looks at the external manifestations, again, the leadership tactics, the KPIs, key performance indexes, and things of that nature, the processes and the results, and all those things that he has formulated in his own mind in regards to the external things. This is what he does to achieve that particular goal, and in most cases, these are the things again that, hence the title of this conversation is placing the cart before the horse. And those things, they work, but we'll find out more about why they don't work, especially when they're out of order and they find themselves working in a counterproductive manner. The horse represents the external, the horse represents the internal world of the leader, their self awareness, their emotional regulation, core values, and very presence. And basically, all those things that are factored in and knowing how to get along to build relationships, that represents the horse, that represents the order of things. Again, the power, the machine behind uh, our progress, if you will, that real progress. So, what happens so often in working with high achieving men is that they have achieved so many different things. They have reached the top of the summit, and unfortunately, it still leaves them with a big question mark. I'm here at the top of this summit. Why aren't things working out the way that I have planned them? And again, looking from that external piece of it, they're absolutely worked out. They've got all kinds of different things. They've accomplished different goals. Again, from an external perspective, but in most cases, from that personal, internal space, uh, there's a huge void with working with high achieving men. There's a major void, and that void, in most cases, is the horse, the power behind the machine, and that is being able to relate to ourselves. Again, doing the inner work, and unfortunately, a lot of times, working with high achieving men, that is the missing link. A lot of times, That is the key. That is the essence for many of us. So whether you're a high achieving man or woman, or just not even in that area, but nevertheless, that is the whether you're just a regular Joe Schmo or Jane Sue or whoever you might be, the essence of who we all are is the inner work that's done, building relationships, moving forward, and creating the capacity to expand ourselves again from that inner space, and that's obviously what's missing with high achieving men. So we're going to dive more into that. So one of the key things when as high achieving men, when we have placed the cart before the horse, again having these things being counterproductive, we experience burnout. We experience major burnout, and that is because we can find ourselves working against the things that are created to work. They work from a natural perspective already. They already worked. They are put together in a way. It's kind of like looking. Someone builds a machine and knowing the inner workings of that machine, knowing exactly how the machine works. We look at the manual. So you do this, you remove this pin, you put this pin in there, and the machine works because it works. And so ideally with high achieving men, again, placing this cart before the horse, the challenge is often that it's counterproductive. The machine, the power behind their progress, their real progress now. They've achieved so many different things already, but the real progress, so that once they reach the top of that summit, they can absolutely feel fulfilled, again, from a balanced perspective. And in most cases, once the high achieving man reaches the top of that summit, he, in most cases, at least the men that I'm working with, they're out of alignment. They're not balanced. They know that something's missing. Again, all the accolades, all the attaboys, they've accomplished all kinds of different things, but inwardly, they're still feeling that void. Inwardly, they know that something's missing. Inwardly, they have placed a cart before the horse, because the real power, the real momentum that's needed is, again, placing the horse in front of the cart for obvious reasons, because the horse is where the power is. The horse is, again, representing that inner work that's been done, that self-awareness, that emotional regulation, that the core values, again, the belief system that make up that individual as a high achieving man. The presence, again, not just presence in regards to coming from that space of power, of manipulation from the old set of ideas in regards to leadership. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we are dealing with as people, as a society, is because there is there's a mantra out there that's all that tells us that, or says that we are operating out of an old paradigm of leadership. And it is truly unfortunate, because that paradigm still exists today. And that paradigm says in most cases that we are to rule over people, we're to control people by fear. And I think that is one of the biggest problems that we are dealing with in leadership. So whether you're a high achieving man or not, or high achieving woman or not, that's one of the bigger issues that we're dealing with in leadership, is that we're without core values. The leadership models are definitely outdated. And outdated in the sense that they really never worked. They were built on a model of scarcity. They were built on a model of lack. They were built on a model of creating fear. And unfortunately, because they were built on those particular models, they have really ruined a lot of people, because the people who delivered such ideas or concept of leadership, they were without the knowledge of that, of knowing thyself. They were without that knowledge. And whether they had the knowledge or not, the system of leadership, as we know it today, in most cases, it didn't require them to know thyself, because it was already built on a system, and it was all built on a system or idea or different concepts in regards to, again, from a foundational perspective. Old systems of leadership, or at least current systems of leadership, are built on a foundation of scarcity, of lack, of fear, instilling fear within the paradigm of leadership, and in all models, so to speak. Again, there's obviously different types of leadership, and that's okay. But foundationally, it comes from a place of fear, scarcity, and lack, creating that fear and creating that scarcity and creating that lack. And so now, through this same mindset, you have that high achieving man who, again, this is the model that he in most cases knows, but once he reaches the top of the summit, he's feeling empty. He's feeling the void, that something's missing. And perhaps he can't put his finger on it, but nevertheless, he knows that there's a void. And so that's, in most cases, the men that I am working with. Thank you for the hearts. There's Timbo. Thank you for joining. And Bra K 47. Thank you for joining. Vodka Ice 3674. Thank you for joining as well. Appreciate you all. But nevertheless, we're talking about the high achieving man placing the cart before the horse, and it absolutely sounds ridiculous. It sounds like it's not going to work, and in fact, it's not going to work. But what happens is, as I just mentioned, oftentimes you have high achieving men reaching the top of the summit, and now they've accomplished all these different kinds of things. And now they're dealing with, well, wait a minute, almost to a point where, or to a place where they've painted themselves in a corner. If you can imagine that, they've got this grandiose of an idea. I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and it sounds good and it looks good. But once they start the project and they putting all the pieces together, and now they find themselves painting themselves in a corner, the door's on the other side of the room, so to speak. And this is what it feels like, essentially, as a high achieving man reaching the top of the summit. And you've put all this work in professionally. You've accomplished all these different kinds of things. You've got all the accolades, the attaboys, so-and-so, this CEO, yet another CEO, you've accomplished all these different kinds of things. But now you're in a space where, wait a minute, I'm still feeling this void. So if you can imagine, again, having all the tools, all the know-how, and as I mentioned earlier, the metrics, knowing the action plans, having that skill set, the intelligence, being driven just by sheer, the need, the desire to accomplish things. And again, there's nothing wrong with that kind of motivation. But what happens is, as I just mentioned to you, oftentimes these high achieving men, they reach the top of the summit and they find themselves, figuratively speaking, but in a sense, filling that void, literally painting themselves in a corner. The door's on the other side of the room. And again, being completely counterproductive. But yet at the very beginning, the plan sounds great. It sounds wonderful. I'll do X, Y, Z. I'll do it this way. I'll work on my career. I'll become very successful. And in most cases, they do just that. They become very successful, very accomplished in what they're doing. But once they reach the top of the summit, they find themselves, wait a minute, I didn't think that the horse was needed. If you're just joining me, I mentioned the horse, kind of give you some background. The horse represents the proper order. The horse represents the self-awareness, the emotional regulation, the core values, the belief system. The horse represents the presence of a man being available. Okay, so there's the cart and the horse. But in this instance, again, from those different types of leadership that we have all perhaps aspired to be, maybe in some cases paid lots of money, loads of money, and being trained under the guise of that particular leadership, different styles of leadership. Now what's happening is that you find that those leaders who meant well, the leaders who have meant well in most cases, because they have painted themselves in a corner. Can you imagine what they've done unintentionally as it may have been? Can you imagine what they have done to their subordinates? If they've painted themselves in a corner in regards to, well, wait a minute, I've accomplished all these different things. I've had several promotions through a course of time, with perhaps a short amount of time. I've experienced all these different promotions. So I've reached the top of the summit now, and I'm still feeling like something's missing. And this is the horse. This is the things that are out of order, that self-awareness, that emotional regulation, the presence. The inner work is the missing piece. Because oftentimes it's kind of like essentially the old saying is sweeping stuff under the rug or the elephant in the room, if you will. And you can only ignore the elephant for so long. And this is, again, in reference to putting the cart before the horse. So in most cases, these individuals are experiencing burnout. Burnout comes from, I believe in most instances, burnout comes from really not only from the exhaustion that comes from just working 15, 16 hours a day. And obviously you can get burned out physically. But burnout in this particular instance comes from the space of working against the thing that actually works. Rather than putting the cart before the horse and using the relationship, using the logic, the wisdom, using the high achieving man, using the very team members that he may have an option or opportunity to work with, rather than put those things in the proper order, he's not only misaligned, but he has again the cart before the horse. So why not put the horse obviously in front of the cart, so that the horse, representing the inner awareness, the inner work that's being done, why not put the horse before the cart, so that the horse, through its own power, its own understanding, that individual power, rather than the power that someone has, and I guess through their own understanding, maybe bestowed upon us. But when we do the inner work, we can find the power that comes from the inside. And no one has to crown us king, so to speak, but the crown is given from the inside when we've done the inner work. So if you can imagine this CEO, or not even just a CEO, but this high achieving man experiencing a burnout, not just because he's working the 15, 16 hours a day, but because he's working counterproductive from what actually works. It feels like he's beating his head against the wall. It feels like he's trying to fight his own shadow. And this is the burnout, because mentally it's exhausting, working against something that you haven't figured out that works. Now you have the external things. In most cases, this high achieving man, he has the external things, but he does not have the inner world mastered. And in most cases, the high achieving man has delayed the inner world to go after the things that were external, to go after the houses, the cars, the property, the things, the women, whatever. But he, in most cases, has delayed those things. Perhaps he feels in some ways that he could come to a place where he could deal with those things later. Deal with the inner work that needs to be done. He wants to, perhaps in some cases, deal with those things later. But here's what happens. Here's what actually happens. Because life is about evolving. Life is about us learning ourselves as well as learning the other person. And in most cases, you can have a high achieving man doing very well for himself, again, from an external perspective. But inwardly, from the inner man or inner boy, he is like a child. He is, what's the term that psychologists use often, is the term they use is arrested development. And it's not necessary that he may have experienced any kind of serious trauma or anything like that. But I'll put it this way. Building relationships can be a sense of trauma, especially if you have not experienced healthy relationships. A lot of times the high achieving men will throw their hands up to the point looking at relationships like, I don't want to do this, too much work. And so what happens is that they will go with the known factors, relationships being the variables, that they're too just chaotic and can be all over the place. But when the man doesn't know himself, and when those different things come up from the inside of who we are as men, oftentimes we will try to suspend those things. We'll try to suppress those things and go after the thing that is known as it relates to, as I was mentioning earlier, as it relates to the action plans, the strategy, the metrics. These things are known. There's no variable behind those things. They're just known entities that, well, these are the numbers that we're going after. These are the numbers we're trying to reach. This is what we're trying to achieve. And the high achieving man, he knows those things. He's aware of those things. But as it relates to the relationship, the horse truly that drives all of these things for every last one of us, based on the relationship, healthy relationships that we have within ourselves. Ideally, when these relationships are not healthy on the inside, meaning that we've done the inner work, it can be very difficult to have relationships just overall, because we're unsettled here. And when we're unsettled here and here, rest assured, it creates chaos, surrounding chaos in other relationships, even on the job at times, making ourselves to be not a very safe leader. Maybe our subordinates, team members don't know if we're going to fly off the handle. Something that's perhaps even out of their control, out of our control. But oftentimes these high achieving men, they are dealing with, again, the metrics, things that they know, things that they can achieve. And so what happens is that they end up pushing people, much like they push themselves. And so what happens is that they end up not building the proper relationships to help them drive, to help them accomplish certain goals. So they end up becoming this reactive leader. Again, they end up becoming this reactive leader because, again, hear this. Hear this. In most cases, because a lot of times with high achieving men, because they have decided to forego relationships uh, and I'm speaking generally, but as they have decided to forego or forsaken relationships to a certain level, a lot of times they will have just shallow relationships, relationships that are just surface. Any other relationship involves too much work in a lot of ways because they've got to deal with themselves and not only deal with themselves, they've got to be able to incorporate the other person in here. And so, how do you make this system work when the high achieving man doesn't know who he is, let alone knowing who his team members are? So, what happens is that he ends up pushing himself to the brink of burnout, again, working against the very thing that is known, but he doesn't know it. He's building an external world. So he's pushing himself and he's also pushing his team members. Because remember, in most cases, this high achieving man has decided to forego relationships. It's not just foregoing relationships with women, but just foregoing relationships by and large as a whole because they take work. So he deals with people on a surface level. And in most cases, that particular kind of high achieving man or leader, he will incentivize people to do certain things by giving them maybe extra time or an extra bonus or whatever the case might be. He can find himself favoriting team members over the other. And this is because he can often find himself, again, having to forego any kind of real relationship. Now, this thing is huge, guys, because he can easily also come into the space of what he ends up manipulating people to get them to do what he wants them to do. And so, in some cases, in most cases, he becomes that reactive leader. We're dealing with burnout. We're dealing with a reactive leader. Because remember, he's chasing the metrics. He's chasing the strategies. He hasn't done the inner work now. Because if he had done the inner work, he would understand that the relationships are important. The very ones that he has failed to understand, that in fact, when he does understand, he can build relationships with his team members, and his team members can help him build the metrics or meet the different quotas. And he can find himself being balanced at the top of that summit. Failed strategies oftentimes is what high achieving men are dealing with. Again, placing the cart before the horse. Failed strategies. Failed strategies. Failed strategies oftentimes, again, as high achieving men, we can find ourselves having ideas. Again, if I just do this strategy, if I just add this strategy, it often comes from a space of being insecure. It often comes from a place from being emotionally unintelligent. Not the strategies, let me clear it up. Not the strategies in themselves, but when the strategies fail. When the strategies fail. Because remember now what I shared with you earlier. The high achieving man, he is focused on the strategies. He's focused on the metrics. He's focused on um, the external things. He's looking at his own intelligence, his own skill set, because he believes in most cases this is what makes the machine work. Again, we're looking at an external reference that this high achieving man is looking at. He's viewing it from an external perspective because he has not made a connection from an internal perspective. He has not connected the two. And if you just joined me, part of my intro is that I am an executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. So that's my spiel. And so these are the men that I'm commonly working with who have reached the top of the summit. And once they reach the top of the summit, they can find themselves feeling yet still invisible, still feeling like they have not made it, still feel like, what is it that I'm missing? This is often the men that I'm working with. So I know this space very well, ladies and gentlemen. So again, it's not about the strategies in themselves, but when the strategies fail. Because remember, this man at this level, he is searching. He is searching. He's not incompetent. He's very well competent in the space of the external things. Again, going after the strategies, knowing the metrics, knowing the language, knowing his skill set, banking and emphasis on his own intelligence. So he's absolutely competent in knowing certain things. But it is the inner space, the inner workings of who he is as a person, again, having to be secure in himself as an individual and not have every little thing that comes up in life be a threat to him. He's emotionally regulated. And so when the strategies don't work, he's not witnessing himself as being a terrible leader. He's not seeing himself as being insecure. He knows enough to go back to the drawing board, say, wait a minute, let's tweak this a little bit. He knows enough to call on the team members who perhaps might be more efficient, better at doing certain jobs than he might be. He can call on the right team members. He can be honest with himself and say, hey, I'm not good at X, Y, Z, but I know that John knows how to look at this particular KPI in a certain fashion and draw certain information that I may not be able to see as a leader. These things are important. But now, again, this is the leader who places the horse before the cart. This is the leader who is emotionally regulated. This is a leader who is self-aware. Self-aware not only for who his team members are, but as it relates to who he is as a person, as it relates to his own shortcomings. That my shortcomings may be there. I'm having to look at my shortcomings, but my shortcomings are not going to be a factor in me accomplishing certain goals. They're not going to be a factor in me dealing with people because I need to be able to draw the right information out of this particular project or goal that I'm trying to accomplish. I'm not going to allow my shortcomings, the things that I'm dealing with, to be a factor in the overall project. And typically what happens is the man at the top of the summit who's achieved all kinds of different things, that's in fact what he has allowed. He's allowed his shortcomings to to be a factor in the overall alignment, the overall balance of what he was trying to achieve. Because in most cases, these men have foregone or forsaken um, relationships, leading with wounds or leading from wounds. I kind of touched bases on that just seconds ago. Oftentimes, men of a certain status, if you will, they are leading from the, or it can be, not in all cases, but as it relates to the conversation, placing the cart before the horse, if you will. This is exactly what these men do. They are leading from a space of wounds, undealt trauma, undealt pain and hurt that is at this particular time or juncture or within certain relationships. That information starts to surface, and it's interesting because a lot of times for the sake of relationships, when we're not in relationships, we can see ourselves, and in some instances, uh, uh, healed. We can see ourselves that, hey, that was the past, and I'm no longer dealing with that anymore. But the challenge is that oftentimes within the relationships, that's where our stuff comes up. So naturally, when we're not in relationships, or especially as high achieving men, excuse me, we can find ourselves having forsaken certain relationships, or just forsaken relationships as a whole, and decided to pursue our careers, because relationships, let's face it, they can be difficult. But in most cases, they're difficult on the levels of what we might be dealing with as well, not to mention what the other person is dealing with. So if we can understand it from that perspective, we can also understand, excuse me, if we can understand from it, leadership from that perspective, again, from that wounded leader, he is potentially operating from a space where he's not even, to be honest, he's not even a safe space for himself. Now, when I talk about high achieving men, let me just put this out here. I'm a man myself, and I absolutely don't have issues with being a man or issues with men. This is for sake of conversation. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. I'm not an anti-man or anything like that. I just want to clear that up. I'm not necessarily so much a pro woman or anything like that. I love the skin that I'm in. I love being a man, and just, this is just, from my perspective in regards to what we deal with as men. Again, as an executive coach, these are the men who I help integrate leadership, that integrated leadership that I was speaking of. So these are the men who I, at the helm of helping them direct this vessel, their lives back and get their lives back in order. So I just wanted to kind of state that. So I'm definitely not anti-man or anything like that. Absolutely love being a man. So with that being said, a lot of times these men who are high achieving men, they're leading from a space of being wounded. Here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes, when a person decides to forego relationships, again, in the place of the high achieving men, he or she, high achieving woman, but in relationship to the men, he has decided to forego or forsaken relationships for a reason. It's not just that he wakes up one day and say, hey, I don't want relationships anymore. So in most cases, he could be dealing with rejection. He could be dealing with a host of different things. He could be dealing with uh, mother-father issues as it relates to that rejection. And so that rejection shows up in his relationships, dealing with mother issues. Again, this just a few examples, but the point I'm sharing with you is that, so what happens is that because that leader who has not been able to deal with his personal relationships, that leader who has not been able to do the inner work, as I mentioned earlier, that leader who has unfortunately painted himself into the corner. The door is on the other side of the room, but now he's painted himself into the corner in his own mind, thinking, hey, if I achieve X, Y, Z, uh, accomplish this and accomplish that, it's going to make life so much better. When in fact, it's the complete opposite. Because he, in most cases, has again reached the top of the summit without the inner work being done. Because in most cases, he does desire relationship. But you have to be able to relate to yourself first. Oftentimes, that is the inner turmoil that people are dealing with, that high achieving men are dealing with, is that they have not made the connection inwardly as it relates to what's not working in their relationships. Now, some time ago, I shared this in regards to the challenges that we face as people. Now, I'm just going to say this as people, not necessarily just high achieving men, but in general, just as people. Oftentimes, the challenges that we face are the challenges that our parents have not dealt with. Because if you look at it from this perspective, where it's that if our fathers dealt with conflict a certain way where it showed us that he was able to smooth the roads, if so to speak, and get along with people, and his anger was, it happens, people get angry, but he was able to emotionally regulate himself. What could the results look like? The results could look like you would see men who were emotionally regulated. So what happens here oftentimes is that what I've shared before in a different broadcast is that we as people now, we're dealing with the unresolved issues that our parents have not resolved. And so we end up inheriting their stuff. Not to mention the stuff that we have to work on within our own selves. Well, before we can, in most cases, know who we are, we've got to deal with the set of conditions that were already pre-existing. And most of us are unaware of those pre-existing issues. So the man that you may be looking at as getting angry, or the woman, or the child, in most cases, he's dealing with the anger of his father, his father's father, his father, his uncle, so on and so forth, to include women. So these are some of the biggest challenges that a lot of us are facing, and we're completely unaware. And I'm not saying no one knows. I'm the only one who knows this. That's not what I'm saying. But I am stating that a lot of people don't think on this level. A lot of people are not looking at it from this perspective. And so what happens is that we can find ourselves dealing with the surface things, dealing with the things that are just right in front of us, and not knowing that there is a host of other things that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, 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 and so on and so forth, that whole lineage of just stuff that we need to get through, that valley, so to speak. And when we have not accomplished certain things in life, again, knowing the the known factors, as I mentioned earlier, of this high achieving man. He knows the metrics. He knows the language. He knows he has the skill set. He has the intelligence. All of these different things are unknown. And because they are unknown, he can get through them. He can figure them out. He can, again, use his intellect on figuring those things out. But the unknown is the void that he is skipping over. And in most cases, he's not skipping over it or jumping over it because he's aware of it. And most cases, for many of us, well, if I just work a little bit harder, if I just do more of this, if I just study more, if I make more connections, if I make more phone calls. So ultimately, you have men who are leading from wounded places. Ultimately, you have men who are leading from places where they're lacking the confidence. Outwardly, they have all the confidence in the world. But inwardly, they're like small children. Because as I mentioned earlier, as we get to know thyself and learn who we are, there's a growth that has to take place in learning who you are. You and I are not the same people that we were or who we were at 12, 17, 20. We're completely different people. But what happens for the man who has decided to forego relationships and not deal with his valley, not do the inner work, he is leading from a place of immaturity. And so oftentimes, this is why you will get that reactive leader. This is oftentimes where you will get that reactive father, reactive husband, because he's leading from a place of immaturity as relates to the inner work that has not been done. Now, I can talk comfortably about these things because I've been there. I've done that. I'm doing the inner work. I'm not a newbie to this thing. I'm not a novice. I've been in this space for nearly 30 years now. So again, you have that leader who's leading from that wounded place. And if you can imagine that leader, again, who's dealing with that space or in that space of that arrested development, if you can imagine that this leader is now offended at every little thing, having a difficulty dealing with his team members because he's offended. And now when he gets offended, it becomes difficult for him to lead with clarity. He's leading now with a bruised ego. And as you and I know, oftentimes when we are doing life, there's some things in life we're just going to have to just kind of just brush off, let it roll off our back like water on a duck's back. That's called maturity. That's called emotional intelligence. But for the leader who's leading from a wounded space, he's in most cases immature from that area. He has not grown up in that area. We all know as adults that life comes with many, many difficulties and challenges. We all know that. But for the leader who has not tackled the very thing from the inside, the inner workings that need to be managed and understood and dealt with, and the healing that needs to take place, he will oftentimes again lead from a bruised ego. And then therefore, what happens? He ends up abusing his team members because his ego has been hurt. So this is what I do, ladies and gentlemen. I work with men I work with high achieving men, and I help them to achieve that goal, that ultimate goal, where that once they reach the top of the summit, they are in fact balanced men. They're not going to just arrive at the top of the summit and feel like they've forgotten something or feel like there's something missing. They can definitely arrive at that top of the summit feeling whole, feeling together, rather than being fragmented. So that is the purpose of that there. The solution. Now let's talk about the solution. Let's talk more about the solution here. The solution to coming into, or at least arriving at the top of the summit, is obviously going to be to do the work. The solution in most cases would be to hire a coach, such as myself. As I mentioned, I'm an executive coach who specializes in helping high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. That's one solution. And I think that's a great solution because as you're trying to figure some things out, guys, it's not a race. It's not a race. But it is a place where you need to, a place that you need to get to, not just for the sake of your career, not for the sake of, hey, I'm at the top of the summit, but for the sake of building relationships with people. Because let's face it, without the right relationships as we have known them, most of us would not be where we are right now. Whether you're married, single, or dealing with other certain issues, or even accomplish certain things. Most of these things don't happen without relationships. And that's the reality. This is the story, again, placing the cart before the horse, is that relationships do matter. But all too often, the high achieving man, he forgoes the relationships. He forgoes the real solution to what he is dealing with, or the choice that he's made not to deal with it. He is overstepping the solution. The solution is right in front of his face in most cases. But he can't get across that hurdle because in most cases, for all of us, is that our idea of relationships, or our capacity for relationships, or their lack of, it comes from our families. Good, bad, or indifferent, it comes from our families. And naturally, as we become adults, or of an age of starting to date, we're taking those ideas and concepts and values and belief systems into our space of building relationships. And sometimes as a result, or a lot of times as a result, our best efforts at putting relationships together, our best effort at building relationships can feel like they've been trampled over, because the other person also has to be factored in as well. And so for us as high achieving men, we in our own minds believe that we put forth our best effort. And in most cases, that best effort feels like it's been rejected. But now we're only working with what we have understood coming from our respective families. That's what we know. But for someone on the outside who, that woman you're trying to build a relationship with, or a person you're trying to build a relationship with, your method or idea or your concept of what relationships look like, it doesn't mesh with them. It doesn't jive with them. And so as men, we can find ourselves feeling rejected because of that. Now, if you attempt that a few more times, a few dozen more times throughout the course of your life, where do you think that could possibly lead you? Perhaps making the decision that relationships don't work for me. Perhaps making a decision, I'm going to put my all into my career because relationships don't work with me. And so now, again, looking at this from a perspective of that young boy who could not get the relationships right. He, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, good chance that he has deemed relationships don't work for him. He has perhaps deemed that he is missing something. What am I trying to figure? What am I missing? He's now looking inward on himself as the person who can't seem to get this thing right. He's looking at life feeling awkward, socially awkward, perhaps. So he makes his career his God. He serves his career, and his career ends up serving him. He and his career are the best of buddies. But in the example I've been sharing with you, again, he has reached the top of the summit, and he's without the inner workings of success. He's reached the top of the summit, and he's wearing a watch without the inner workings. And that happens so often with many of us. And again, you don't obviously have to be a high achieving man, but or a woman. It happens with many of us in life. We have been rejected. We're dealing with abandonment issues. And because we're dealing with those issues, it can be difficult for us to see things clear. We can find ourselves turning inward on ourselves when it was perhaps, again, us taking the time to know thyself. And so you have this young man, this young boy, grown man outwardly, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it could be any age, outwardly has all these different things that he's accomplished, but inwardly, he's like a teenager. Inwardly, he is socially awkward, disconnected, offended at almost every little thing, broken because he hasn't figured out how to make relationships work. Now, this is really at the essence of what I do working with high achieving men, is that we help to travel down that road because it's absolutely essential. No man or woman will be able to escape doing the self-reflection, doing the inner work. Because As I've been sharing with you for a good amount of time, is that oftentimes the men that I work with, I work with men, but there are women too, ladies and gentlemen. Don't misunderstand it. This is a people thing. Relationships are not easy because in most cases we're the issue. We're where the issue is stemming from. And even if that issue means that we've got to create boundaries and we don't want to create boundaries or haven't known how to create those boundaries, we can be the issue in the relationships. So because it feels like everyone is stepping on us or feels like we've been taken advantage of, sometimes it's time to look at thyself. Because yes, there are some selfish people out there, absolutely. But even in this world that we live in and dealing with people who are selfish, we don't have to let them infringe on our lives. We have to be able to put up the stop sign. And again, oftentimes as it relates to high achieving men, they can find themselves being burnt in those areas as well. Again, obviously in relationships as a whole, they can find themselves being burnt in those areas as well, because a lot of times the high achieving men, because outwardly they are grown well into perhaps their 40s, 30s, and 50s or even 60s, but because they have outwardly they've grown, but inwardly they are these young boys, immature. When I say immature, I mean that in the deepest respect, but immature meaning that not knowing, not having experienced certain things. What happens is that they end up not knowing what the boundaries look like either. And so they can find themselves just giving everything to that particular woman. She's been hurt too. So in most cases, she doesn't know herself. And obviously the roles can be switched around as well. The man can be a taker too. But he's hurting too. You've got two people who are hurting. And they're responding differently in each of the situations. So the solution is to be prepared to do the work. Be prepared to do the work. Not from a space of judging yourself. Because truth be told, I didn't wake up like this. This stuff takes work, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, this is just an ongoing work. I don't even know if it ever ends, because you're constantly looking at thyself. Because if we know, or if the known factor in what I've shared with you, if the known factor is really not a variable anymore, the known factor is the relationship. It's really not a variable anymore because we know what we need to do. But it's a variable because relationships are complex at times. It's a variable because there are a variety of personalities, influx of personas that we may be dealing with on the inside. the unfinished business that our parents didn't finish that's now placed in our lap. So well before we can come to know who we are, we've got to be prepared to tackle those valleys that are out there, because some of them go deep. Some of the valleys that you and I will have to walk through, they're not going to come up in the first month of a relationship. They're not even going to come up in the first year of the relationship. They could very well come up in the 13th month, the second year, the fourth year, the fifth year of a relationship. But as long as we're without the relationships or decide to forgo relationships for various different reasons, we can find ourselves still going from one relationship after the other, because ideally, those places that we need to touch, those places inwardly that we need to tend to, those places are really the operating system that's pulling all the strings like a puppet. That operating system is what we are responding to. Those dark places, those caves, if you will, that are out there and that we're reluctant to deal with. Those are the things that keep showing up. And we can find ourselves blaming the other person, blaming yet another person, and blaming yet another person. And now we have had several relationships. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had my share of relationships too. So this is not a dig at anyone. I've had my share of relationships. I'm doing life and have experienced life just like most of you. But at some point, it got exhausting. At some point, you come to your end. At least I had come to my end, and one of the key factors I had come to my end is through my faith. That was a major factor, and I'm not here to try to convert anyone. I'm just sharing my experience. That was one of the major factors that brought me to a place of trying to figure this thing out. Got me to a place of having to make a decision to sit still, because I can guarantee you these conversations that I'm having with you, I'll continue to have on different platforms. This is not something that you're going to get driving by 75, 85 miles per hour or through the drive-through. You're going to have to sit still to get this stuff. Again, it's part of the solution. We're going to have to be eager to come up with different solutions from what we have previously dealt with. So if your situation is you've been in one relationship after the other as a high achieving man and they're not working for you, let's have a conversation. I think there's a form. There's a form here on the TikTok that you can fill out and inquire, ask questions and things of that nature. You can book a call with me as well, and we can kind of have a conversation and get to the crux of what's happening. If you're so inclined, fill out that form. Again, getting to the solution. The solution is not always easy. But the solution is not a mystery either. The solution isn't hiding from you. The solution is us being prepared to ask ourselves those difficult questions. Or again, in the midst of a coach who could help you facilitate certain things. And it's not that the coach is even going to give you something that's new. But when you're walking this process, ladies and gentlemen, or gentlemen, when you're walking this process, walking through those valleys, it is nice. It is encouraging to have someone walk with you in the depths of those valleys. It is important to have someone there to help you understand what you're walking through, to help you peel back the layers. So part of the solution is being eager to solve your own problem. In most cases, as a coach, as an executive coach, I don't solve the problem for you. I help to facilitate what you're dealing with, place it in front of you. That's the goal. I don't have a magic button for anything, but I've asked my own self the tough questions. And so by asking myself the tough questions and eventually coming up with an answer, I'm not afraid to ask my clients the tough questions. Because when you can answer the tough questions, be prepared to answer the tough questions, even if you have to sit with them for just a day or two, and some people might sit with it longer. But when you are prepared to address those tough questions and you come up with an answer, or you're prepared to look at the things that you need to look at and to descramble certain things, it's freedom. It's freedom. As you begin to untangle those things or scramble certain motivations and feelings that come across the airwaves, that as we are trying to make sense of what we're going through. Again, we're not talking about the external things. We're talking about the inner work that is the solution for when high achieving men reach the top of that summit. They're reaching that summit from a place of wholeness. They're reaching the top of that summit with security, being secure in who they are. And here's the interesting thing about this security, being secure who you are, is that you, or we as high achieving men, we make other people feel secure. We are a safe place for other people. Leadership is not just about orchestrating certain things or facilitating certain things. It's psychology, ladies and gentlemen. It's psychologically affecting those team members as leaders, as fathers, as husbands. We are absolutely affecting the psychological minds of our children, of our wives, of our team members as well. Because again, you've got a wounded leader as a man. He's immature. He's a little boy on the inside. Can you imagine the disruption that he causes on any kind of job? It's like giving a child a weapon. And when men have forsaken the inner work, and now they're placed in positions of leadership, having to be over or deal with, manage large teams. Can you imagine the damage that he can do or have done, the damage that has been done when you're dealing with men who have not done the inner work? Now, oftentimes we can see leadership as just something that's apart from us, and that's just on the job. That's what takes place away from home. But that's not true. Your leadership also has to show up in your home. Again, this is that integrated leadership that I work with men. We're meshing the two together. We've got one operating system here and yet another operating system here. And obviously, trying to mesh the two together, there's going to be some conflict. Because the professional operating system, again, that man who knows the metrics, who knows the language, who has the right attitude, who's driven, who ready to accomplish some things, he knows his way around that professional space, but he does not know that inner world. Externally, he's set, but inwardly, he doesn't know. Or he's made an attempt and it's failed several times from that inner space. Enough times from that inner space where it's failed that he decides that relationship doesn't work for him anymore. So now he's this young boy, a grown man outwardly, but inwardly he's a immature person making big decisions from a professional space. And when his ego is wounded, he ends up wounding other people. So again, trying to mesh these two together, not impossible, but it does take work. It's not something that you're going to approach, as I mentioned earlier, going through a drive-through. It's not something that you're going to approach driving by at 75, 85 to 95 miles per hour. No, you're going to have to slow down on this one here. Because what you are viewing at 95, 75 miles per hour, the view is going to be completely different. This is a view where you're going to have to feel some things. It's going to be painful. Still talking about the solution. It's going to hurt, but it's necessary. So after you have, figuratively speaking, after you have regained consciousness after the surgery, you're going to be, it's going to feel awkward. But nevertheless, once you get to the top of that summit, you're going to be the whole person that you were designed from the very beginning. And can you imagine the new authority that you're walking in, the real authority, the real power that you will be able to walk in? Can you imagine that? If you can imagine it, again, fill out that form that is available somewhere out there on TikTok. It's a form that's going to allow you to contact me. I have a 30-minute free consultation, and find out more information about what I do. And obviously, you reach out to me. We'll be talking specifically more about your situation, obviously. Guys, I've been on for about an hour and 19 minutes. Let's see here. I think I'm going to wrap it up here. So I've had, wow. Lots of people in here. So guys, Thank you, Kairos Chronos. I appreciate that. You definitely saved my life, so I could keep working through living and healing. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Kairos. I appreciate that, sister. Absolutely. Thank you very much. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to wrap it up here. It is a lot of you, and I really, really appreciate it. All the all of you who have stopped by and been a part of this conversation. So yeah, I don't just say this is very surprising. Uh, yeah. So again, if you have any questions related to the information I've shared with you, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to fill out the form and or just add me to your. Thank you. God bless you too as well, Kairos Chronos. Thank you. Again, you have any questions, fill out the form and or just add me here on TikTok, and I'll be sure to follow as well. And I typically will look at your account, and I'm going to be honest with you. I don't follow any just stuff. I like to be a man of integrity, and that's just the person I am. And what I'm giving out to you is definitely integrity, and I would like it that level back as well. But nevertheless, so if you're worthy of the follow, please follow, and I will follow back. If you're on something else, I'm likely not interested. So again, guys, it's been a pleasure. Hope that you all will have a great evening. Again, thank you, Kairos. Thank you, King. Thank you, Felicia Garrett, Lisa, Casey, Kiera, Andy, Zakia, God with Bree. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Barbie Noir. Thank you, Armando Jones. Arman Jones. Thank you. Lots of people, guys. Again, over almost 110 people in here. So again, thank you all for being a part of this conversation. I hope this conversation has been a blessing to you, that it's in fact made sense to you. And we'll say good night for now. Ciao.